Okay. Welcome everyone. Calling to order the board meeting for December 16th. First one, flag salute.
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Number 2, board agenda approval.
I move to approve the current board agenda.
Jerry, can.
I'll second.
Thanks, Phyllis. So the next one is actually the closed session. Is there any public comment?
You do need to take
You
a
have
vote
to
on, vote on the
Oh,
minutes.
sorry.
Sorry.
Okay. I think I'm just still adjusting.
It
Okay.
takes a couple minutes.
So all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So the agenda is passed. The closed session, any public comments?
There are no public comments.
Okay. So we adjourn to the closed session now and we'll come back by 6 o'clock. Thank you. We are back from the closed session. There is nothing to report from closed session. So we are in 7.1 superintendent's report.
You. So a couple of things I wanted to highlight today is we did just have 2 very successful vaccination clinics hosted out at our school site. So we will continue to work with our public health to see if we can offer additional vaccination clinics. Really are encouraging. I know that our communications director has been sending out the notices, really encouraging everyone, if they're eligible to get that booster shot, to go ahead and get that. We were able to offer that at our vaccination clinics as well. We do know that that's going to be important moving forward with the new virus that's come out, the new variant with Omicron. They're really encouraging to get that booster shot. So we will do whatever we can to support that. And then just really wanted to give a shout out. I know that our band and music teachers have been working very hard over these last 2 weeks, putting on concerts and realizing that it's been about 2 years since we were able to see those concerts. So a huge kudo to them, and just can see the excitement, and they were wonderful and beautiful performances. So really appreciated that as well. The third piece is, I said at the last board meeting, I really just hopefully encourage our community and our parents, as they are having questions about the schools and our data that's out there, and when they have those questions, to reach out to staff or to check our website for answers, because we are still seeing a lot of misinformation out there on social media. And I would really encourage our parents and community to reach out to staff to find out the answers versus searching the social media that may not have the most accurate information as they form their decisions and questions on. And then that really does lead to, earlier today, we were alerted that there is a TikTok posting that is concerning, that they're talking about the threat of violence at schools for December 17th across the entire country. So we really would encourage parents to please talk to their students, let them know if they see something on social media that's alarming, to reach out to an adult at school or to reach out to law enforcement and to alert us as soon as possible. And then just really reassuring parents that we're doing everything possible to keep the campuses safe. We know that our local law enforcement is on high alert for tomorrow as well. And we are moving forward with having school in a safe environment. So that's it for me. Thanks.
Okay, then we'll move to the next one, 8.1, employee organization. Do we have anybody there?
We do not have any comments.
Thank you. Then we'll go to the 9, public comments. This is for the items which is not actually in the agenda, and you can fill in the comment card in the website. And do you have any?
We do. We have one public comment. Latha, if you could please raise your hand.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear.
Sure. Yeah, the reason I'm talking on this public comments is my daughter was sent from the school yesterday because she came in contact with someone who is COVID. I'm not blaming the person, but what I'm blaming is the process that was used. When I talked to my daughter, she said the whole time she was masked up. The only time she did not mask was during lunchtime. That too, it didn't take her 5 to less than 10 minutes. So according to the CDPH, she should have gone into the modified quarantine where she could still attend the school for 10 days with weekly twice testing. But that did not happen. She was sent home and to say quarantine for 7 days or 10 days based on the home quarantine. Today, my daughter did not do anything, wasted her entire day. So I sent her so much of back and forth emails to school board. And finally, I had to include school board to see why it was not handled properly. But what did the answer I got? I got the answer is, thank you for keeping the community safe. Please, I'm not sending that's not my job. I'm sending my daughter for school and not to waste her days. So I would like to hear from you guys to my email respond. What is the action are you going to take? I'm fed up and I'm getting frustrated. That's what I wanted to talk to this public comment. And I'm sure there are other parents who might also have their children sent back without doing a proper investigation. All they did is, oh, okay, the daughter, she came into somebody in contact with COVID, do the contact tracing, send them home. But you did not do the guidelines that you yourself and CDPH set up for guidelines. That's what I am very frustrated. That's what I want you to guys to look into this matter, because this is a midst of the flu season. You cannot keep sending the kids every 10 days to go and quarantine at home. You need to come up with a modified version. CDPH is just a guidelines. You need to ask your employees to assess the situation. What went wrong? Did you ask my daughter whether she was masked up? How long? You didn't do any inquiry. You just did send her home. That's why I'm very, very frustrated. Before it become a huge factor, and where community can start questioning and organizing these issues, bringing up this issue, please take this action into matter. That's all I wanted to say in these public comments. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Lata. Do you have anybody? Okay. Thank you very much. Then let's go to the item number 10, consent. 10.1, approval for November 30th board for advanced meeting minutes. Can someone make a motion?
I move that we approve 10.1.
I'll second. Aye.
Aye.
Next one is information presentation. That is item number 11.1, school updates. Who's going to start?
So tonight we do have the information to share with you after our parent choice of enrollment. And so Leslie will walk you through the latest updates.
Great. Thank you so much. If we just go to the first slide. Tonight, I'm going to share the school choice numbers, the most up-to-date data as of Monday, which was the day following December 10th, which was the date we were hoping to get all responses by. And then I'm going to provide a little bit more information about the transition advisory team, which is the district level team, not the school-based team. So if you go to the next slide, as of December 12th, our responses are looking super great. So we're really excited that we have 88% or more families that have responded. What you'll notice if you look at the Meyer-Holtz band, Meyer-Holtz, 196 families were provided an option to choose for next year, and that would be their current kindergartners through their current fourth graders. Out of those 196, we have 32 that have chosen Eaton, 117 Dilworth, 23 Blue Hills. That's an 88% response. And the 24 in the parentheses are the numbers of individuals that have not responded. So it's a really relatively small number. The same, you look at Muir, we've got a 98% response with 3 that we're still working on to get responses from. And then Regnart, the 94% with 13 individuals that we're still working to get responses from. Last week and this week, the secretaries at the school sites, Meyer-Holtz, Muir, and Regnart, were reaching out to those families. So potentially since Monday, that number has changed. The families that we do not have responses by or verbal responses by, and we've attempted, will be identified at their default schools. So if the 24 individuals from Meyer Holtz, we don't get a response from them, then we will next school them at Dilworth. The Muir 3 students, we would next school at Dilworth. And then the Regnard, it would be dependent upon where they lived, on which side of Rainbow. So our next steps related to this information is to begin shifting them over in our student information system so that we have the appropriate next school, and then to begin working on class configurations. As we know, when we look at these numbers, so we'll use Eaton as an example, there's 32 students, but they are probably anywhere from first grade through fifth graders. And so we'll need to look at our push-through numbers and then our incoming projected kindergarten numbers. And we'll do preliminary class configurations so that HR can actually do their next step in January to begin posting what our openings and vacancies would be. Next slide. What we've done here is just done a quick representation of what enrollment could potentially look like at the school sites based on the numbers that have come in. We know that these are not exact numbers, but they are potential just based on the information that we have to date. I'm going to explain them to you because they are a little bit different on each slide, and I just want to make sure that you understand our calculations. So if we look at Blue Hills, and we take the number of families that have responded or chosen Blue Hills from the Meyer Holtz neighborhood, there were 23. There were 8 Muir families that chose Blue Hills. Our push through numbers at Blue Hills, meaning our current kinder through 4th, that would become 1st through 5th next year, would be 217. And then our Regnart families, there were 48. Then what we did, and this is where it gets a little bit tricky, is we looked at what the projected kindergarten enrollment would be. Because the majority of the Meyer Holtz and Muir families, their default school is Dilworth, you're going to see their kindergarten projected numbers at Dilworth. What we also know, though, is that may change. We may have a new family who registers for kindergarten who lives in the Meyer Holtz neighborhood who doesn't choose Dilworth. And so there's going to be a little bit of flex in the number. But when we allocated kindergarten projections, we did it based on the default school. So we anticipate 38 based on demographers' information through Decision Insight, potentially 38 incoming kindergartners, plus 7 from Regnart. And the way we came up with the percentage at Regnart, because we don't know which side of Rainbow they're going to live on, we basically did it based on the percentage that we were seeing in response rate. So 23% of the families that attend Regnart chose Blue Hills. So we did 23% of Regnart's kindergarten projections. And again, it's just for kindergarten, it's really just unknown at this point. So we did the best we possibly could. So the total of possible kindergartners at Blue Hills would be 45. So that's just over. Really, it's not. It's 40. It's just at 2 kindergarten classrooms. The total enrollment could potentially be 341. It is a school site where we currently have a transitional kindergarten classroom. We did not incorporate those transitional kindergarten numbers here, but that does not mean we will not be placing a transitional kindergarten classroom on that campus. We're still discussing the final locations of those campuses, as you'll hear a little bit more about when we talk about TK. If you go to the next slide. Dilworth. So we took the 117 Meyer Holtz families plus the 189 Dilworth families plus the 156 Muir families. And then we took the total projections for kindergarten, the 24, 33, 23 to equal 80 kindergarten students, which is just at 4 kindergarten classrooms with space for growth, with also space if they all were to show up, to ensure that if new families moved in, we wouldn't run into an overflow issue. With a total student enrollment of 542. The other thing that I do want to mention, that why we will see kindergarten fluctuation numbers is based on open enrollment to alternative schools. We know that all of our alternative schools will enroll new kindergarten families, and across the district, we see some of those families that we're anticipating at the school site, Dilworth, for example, that will potentially go to alternative schools also. Going to the next slide. So for Eaton, we had 32 families from Meyerholtz choose Eaton, plus the 331 that are currently there. We only calculated Eaton potential kindergarten enrollment with a total of 430 students. And then our final slide, and this is the one that gets a little bit tricky because of the calculations for the Regnart families and the percentage. We've got 161 Lincoln families who have chosen Regnart, 357 Lincoln students, 50 students, which is the first Lincoln kindergarten projections are 50, and 77% of Regnart's potential kindergartners is 25 students to equal 75 kindergarten students and a total of 593. We're feeling really good about the numbers. We're feeling very comfortable and confident about the space that we have, and are excited to begin the work with our transition teams. If you go to the next slide, this is just a reminder of the work that we'll be doing in regarding community engagement, parent workshops, which we had successful parent workshops that Allison put on a week ago, I believe it was, stakeholder meetings and district transition team meetings. I continue to work with schools as requested. Today I had a lovely meeting with 2 individuals from the Meyerholtz community that needed some clarification and had questions. And so, you know, as community finds the need, I'm hoping that they find the access to me to be able to meet with them and think creatively about some of the things that they're grappling with. They gave great input of things that we could do to make sure that our communication is really clear related to our mapping or messaging for registration. And so, you know, I welcome those conversations. The next slide just shows again, as we move forward with our site-based and our district teams, we are envisioning a district transition team that also individual school site teams, whether or not they are schools that are closing, consolidating, or receiving. And then the new slide for you is the final slide, and it's focusing on our district core transition team, which is really an advisory team. The membership of that team will be principals of each of the schools. So the schools that are being either closed, consolidated, or a receiving school. We will put out information in the community, meaning community stakeholders, staff, and our community at large. We'll be looking for anywhere from at least a minimum of 3 certificated employees and 3 classified employees of the closed, consolidated, and receiving school sites. We'll be looking for 3 to 7 parents. We'll be looking for, or we will be requesting that our directors and executive cabinet members that play a role in either logistics, communication, or engagement are part of the team. This will be the advisory team that will set the parameters and set sort of the guidelines, work on common messaging that is needed across the board to support the site-based teams that we envision will be launched sometime, no later than March, potentially as early as February. When I met with the principals to talk about the site-based teams, and so I'll come back at a later date in January to tell you a little bit more about those teams and the composition. One of the things that was really important to them, I also know it's really important to our union groups, is that the site-based teams need to formally start when we have a better idea of who is going where. Because if a site-based team is formed, certainly they can form at Muir because Muir is consolidating to another location. But the site-based teams in regards to the receiving schools need to ensure that we have equal representation from individuals who are joining the school new and individuals who are there. And so we believe that process will be done sometime January, February, and are confident that they'll be able to, as site-based teams, do great work in the spring to welcome new families onto campus, new staff onto campus. But it's just critical that all individuals have a part or have the ability to be part of the planning and organization and not feeling like things are being done for them when they're joining a new school without input. So with that, I will take questions or comments that you have.
Thank you, Leslie. I'll open up for questions then. Who wants to start?
I happy to start.
Okay, thanks, Jerry.
Thank you. And thanks for the planning here. Just a couple of clarification questions. Wondering a bit more about the responsibilities of the district advisory team. You talked about setting guidelines. Could you maybe give some examples of the kind of guidelines in what areas, just to help me better envision how
Yeah.
these two groups will work together?
Absolutely. So if we look at the different working groups of the district advisory team, we're envisioning breaking up into 3 groups, similar to the way we did with COVID. One would be the logistics, one would be communication, and the other would be engagement. I think engagement is probably the one that is easiest to explain or describe. And that group would be talking about or brainstorming, and they'd be getting information from school leaders, of course, but they'd be brainstorming things that we believe as an organization should be common for all students. So it wouldn't be dictating exactly how and when an activity would happen. But what we want to ensure happens is it doesn't matter if it's 33 students going to Eaton or 200 students going to Dilworth. If there is going to be a welcome event, or if there is going to be a tour, or if there's going to be an opportunity to meet teachers, it happens consistently across the district. And so what we envision happening is we will meet in early and late January. We'll also allow those school teams in February, March to begin, and there will be an ebb and flow back and forth so that we can ensure that the only term that comes to mind is that one group does not outdo another group, that we have common equitable experiences. The other piece is to ensure that we have, if you look at communication, that we are hearing from the school-based groups and from our advisory group on what are the missing pieces in communication? How do we as a district, or how does Erin support ensuring that we have clear communication that is going out, that is similar across the board? And then logistics would be that, moving, is that the process in regards to packing, unpacking, timelines, et cetera, how materials are got or received, are organized in such a way that we are enabling and supporting as an advisory team and putting things in place so it is easier for school-based teams to do their work.
So you would imagine a site-based team for every school that's a receiving, so Eden, Blue Hills, Lincoln, et cetera, and I suppose one for Muir for Clip.
And the closing schools. And so the
the
other,
closing schools
yeah,
as
so
well.
there
I
would be a site-based team at each of the school sites, whether or not they would be closing or receiving. And so that the schools that are closing have similar experiences, and the schools that are receiving have similar experiences. Not identical, but similar.
Sure. Okay. And in terms of traffic mitigation, do you see that more as at a district level? Is that something you would expect the site teams to work with their municipalities? How do you see that working?
Yeah, I think in some ways, I think things regarding traffic may come up as part of the logistics team. I do not believe the site-based teams would necessarily be working on that, although there are interested individuals at each site related to traffic. And so the city, the school leader, myself, and potentially Chris's department may be working on things related to that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Satish.
Jerry. Who wants to go next?
I just have a comment.
Okay, thanks.
I think that the reason that some of those people haven't responded to the schools of choice is because they're fine with the default school and they just figure, why would I respond? I'll just take the default.
That's what.
So I think that we can be encouraged that the numbers are pretty good, considering that some of those people just chose not to respond because they're accepting the default school. So I think we're in
Yeah.
good shape.
I would agree.
Who wants to go?
I can go. So I just wanted to piggyback a little bit on Jerry's question about the site-based teams. I just want to understand. So there's going to be a site-based team at each school, but for the receiving schools, there will be representation from both the incoming population and the existing population.
Yes, which
But
is,
at the ones that are consolidating, those will just be made up of representatives from that community.
correct.
Okay.
Right. And there may be an individual that sits on both, right? So I may be a teacher at Muir who sits on the Muir team, but I may also sit on the Dilworth team because that's where I end up. Yeah.
Got it.
And I know that it is it's an interest of our unions to make sure that there are representation either both on the district advisory team and on the site-based teams that really do look at, when I'm a receiving school, how do we ensure that there is a balance and there is voice and individuals are included in that dialogue and decision. Yep.
So I think this is great. So thank you so much for all the work on that. And when you're talking about sort of key events that are going to happen for each one, when do you anticipate, like, roughly that those dates will be able to go out? Because I know for a lot of us, we have our calendars, not only the school calendar, but our sort of weaving all the family stuff together calendars, already in shape for spring. So how soon do you think you'll be able to sort of get some dates, and even if it's not pinned down exactly what those events are going to be yet, maybe the key ones that you already know are going to be similar between all the
Right.
sites?
Right. To be honest with you, that's a super great question that I haven't given a lot of thorough thought to in regards to the timelines. I think our hope would be is that throughout the spring, we would have a variety of events for families to choose. Summers get a little bit hard, so there may be some parent organization group that is organizing some summer get to know you activities in the park. I think the other piece is looking at what are we able to do in the spring with COVID restrictions. Some of the things that we have heard have been an opportunity again for campus tours now that I really know where I'm going, and how do we open that up a little bit more. We know that our staff, prior to choosing and then obviously after choosing, want that same opportunity to be able to walk a campus and understand the campus. So I think we're trying to figure out how do we meet staff needs so that they can make their choices as well as community needs. I know there have been conversations about, are there ways that we can look at class configurations and even assignments of class, even if it's not connected to a teacher yet, so that a classroom community could begin to build and form together. And so those are things that take a little bit more time. I would say probably March is tough if we're just starting meetings, no later than March. Although the school, depending on now that we know where parents are going, partnerships have begun between school leaders at the schools as they've chosen and the new school leaders. And so we may be able to get a little bit of earlier traction on that and set some common guidelines before the advisory team sort of sets up that frame.
I think that would be great. And anything that's maybe just going to be a one-off, especially maybe give some attention to the things. The sooner we can get that date out, if it's only going to be offered once, I know I would prioritize those things as a parent versus if I know there's going to be a series of 3 summer play dates, and if I wind up only being able to make 2 of them and not the third, like that would just feel differently to me than something that's only going to be offered once. So that's great. Thank you.
Okay.
And then are you anticipating, as I'm looking at these numbers, would there be any changes to, like, I know we always configure our sites to allow for late enrollment after priority and or newcomers partway through the year. Are you anticipating still building out these schools specifically in the same regard that we'll be able to have some spots at each grade level for anybody new moving into the neighborhood mid-year?
Yeah, I think once we are able to pull this data into actual grade level and we see what those class configurations are, I do think that we will have to make considerations for that so that there is, so that we are not packed so tightly, so that we can allow for that ebb and flow. The other piece is that we will have preliminary staffing, but then we have open enrollment for alternative schools and for other neighborhood schools, which changes them a little. So I think our goal is to look at how do we ensure that we have enough
Right.
space for that.
Okay, and I mean, all of these are well under capacity of where they were even just a couple years ago. So
Yes.
we've got plenty of space.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Lori. And I think I have a question very similar or in line with what Lori asked. So did you have a chance to take a look into the current, the request? Because like I'm just thinking an hypothetical situation, let's say Blue Hills, for example, from Mayor Halls, you have 23 kids applied, right? So is it from a same grade? Is it from a different grade? So my worry is like if any of the grade, probably you can have an uneven or a balance issue. A bunch of kids from the, let's say, third grade is coming and applying, right?
Right.
So your equilibrium can be, in a question there, right? So would there be a situation that we will not be able to accommodate their request, or
No.
you would be somehow able to accommodate that?
Based on these numbers, we don't have concerns about accommodating.
We are talking only the total number. Are we looking into the individual grades?
We have not. So that, seeing that the data just came in this week, our task for those that are working over the break and early January is actually to code them. So we have to go into our system, and each of these, we can do a mass update, but each of these individuals, we need to make sure that we mass update them to go now, let's say to Blue Hills. And then we will be able to run numbers so that we can see, okay, now how many kids is that really? How many first graders, how many first grade bodies is that? How do we put them into classrooms? So we'll have a better idea of that in January.
Especially, a typical school, what happens, kids come in kindergarten and they keep progressing, right? That's good. So there is a healthy way of doing it. Now we are adding in between. So there can have, let's say, a situation that just for our talk, like typically you have three third graders, let's say. You probably will have to have 4 or 5 third graders if many of them are third graders who's applying, right? So you're getting what I'm saying? So
I think that would be as we look at the class configurations, and that's where for any of the campuses, when we look at having a split number of, for example, like second and third grade where we've made combo classes, that would
It's a
be where
combo,
we would
okay.
look at those scenarios as well.
Mhm.
I think to Lori's question earlier, we certainly are looking to accommodate all of the students that are enrolled in the school now and to have some space for those new ones coming in. So in January, we can bring back more with those class configurations specifically by grade would look like with these numbers.
And by when are you going to close this kind of finalize? Now we are asking that we are still following up with some of the parents who have not responded, right? So kind of.
Well, I think Phyllis is spot on, just based on conversations that I have had with families. I believe that these individuals that have not responded, and I know that these numbers are lower now because we had secretaries reaching out this week. So I would say it's probably pretty much closed as of tomorrow, but that doesn't really matter because if a family, let's say here, made a choice to go to Dilworth and they changed their mind, they would request a transfer to go to another school site. It is so early in the game right now that because we haven't made our class configurations and we haven't completely staffed, that movement will happen. And like Stacy said, we also anticipate movement when priority registration opens through the summer, and we will plan for that. And potentially we say, okay, we've got, X number of teachers at this school site, and we are surprised that we get more summer registrations, then we add X+1 midsummer, and we will continue to do that. And we're honestly keenly focused on these school sites, as we are with other school sites, but ensuring we're comfortable with capacity. We'll have plenty of room for these students, and we'll have plenty of room if we are surprised by an additional classroom worth of kids.
A follow-up to what you asked when you're done. So I just,
I'm done. Yeah,
yeah,
okay,
finish
I'm done.
yours
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure I'm conceptualizing this exchanged correctly, that when we passed our resolution, we said, every student that's affected by this, we're going to ensure that they get their choice. And then our existing policy says, once you're in a school, you're going to stay in that school for the rest of your experience. So if our family has chosen Dilworth, they're going to get that. And even if all the third graders decided to go to Dilworth, and that makes third grade a little bit bigger, and then, that's going to roll up with those kids because they get to stay, because our existing policy is they get to stay.
Yes, because it becomes their new school, their
Right.
school.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure I had it right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Satish, I also have
Yes,
one more
please.
question. Sorry, this is probably a question for Mike. Do teachers know the process? Do we have a process for them to make choices about where they go, these displaced teachers, or is it too soon for you to tell us?
We are in the middle of working that out with CEA, right? As we
So you
speak.
don't have anything definitive yet?
We've agreed on the timelines. We just now have to tighten up the process in which how it works.
So I assume when that's done, you'll report to us?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
you.
Sylvia, anything? You have more?
Great,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay, I think we are okay then. Do we have any public comments?
No, we do not.
Okay, conclude? Okay, thank you. Then let's move on to the next one. So 11.2, update on the expansion of TK.
So thank you. So with the recent passing of AB 130, there has been a lot of talk of the expanding of the transitional kindergarten program. So tonight we wanted to bring back information to you as a board, some of the considerations as we're planning. This would be a phased-in approach. We're excited, to be able to continue to grow and offer to eventually all of our 4-year-olds. And so tonight it's kind of a team approach. So I think you'll be hearing from Allison, Mike, and Chris as different aspects of the TK impact our district. So I will turn it over to Allison initially.
Thank you. So each of us will take a portion of this. I'll start out with a little bit of the history and the legal guidelines, and then I'll be passing to Leslie to talk about enrollment projections, and then Mike will take the staffing, and then we'll finish up with Chris on funding and facilities. So this is kind of a look backwards. I bet many of you remember these changes. Now it's history, but we lived it, right? So the state in 2010, when the age for kindergarten shifted, that was the same time that TK became phased in all districts in California. And over the years, there have been some adjustments. So soon after that, we saw new credentialing requirements for teachers, and then the option to expand TK as an option for children who are turning 5 at any point during the school year. And then now we are at a place where all children will have access to TK gradually. We'll be phasing this in over time. And the ratio is a new requirement here. So you can see on that 2021 bullet that 1 teacher for every 12 students, with the intent to go to a 10-to-1 ratio. That's something that we'll show some visuals on, and we'll go into a little further detail as we keep going with the presentation. All of this is part of a state focus on the whole child, and really that recognition that early rich learning experiences have on brain development and really overall long-term success and well-being. So it is a very big and exciting move for our state that really provides all children over the next few years with access to a new grade in school, really is how we should think about it. Instead of kindergarten being that first experience, it'll be TK open to all students. So this graphic here is showing how we'll gradually get to that point. So you can see the current place where we are now is that birthday between September 2nd and December 2nd, which matches that shift that we had on the other timeline when the kindergarten birth date shifted.
And then little by little, we'll be adding a couple of months. So we're going from December to February, and then April, and then June, and then all the way built out in 25, 26. So this will give districts time to adjust to this new requirement. We are able, if we chose to go beyond those birth dates, but we must meet at least that growing minimum. And since the beginning, TK and K, we've thought of TK as the first year of a 2-year kindergarten program. That's been how it has been described. And the instructional minutes and the number of days have been the same for kindergarten and TK all this time, and that is not changing. The minimum number of instructional minutes and the absolute minimum, which would be like on a minimum day, for example, are also the same for TK and K, and you can see how that lays out across the other grades as well. All of these graphics, I should note, came from a school services presentation. We've been attending a lot of different trainings, and they shared their slides with us, so we're happy to be able to use some of their graphics here.
So on this slide, it provides you with data related to our current transitional kindergarten program in Cupertino. We do have 10 classes. The numbers here are based on our CBEDS numbers. At that point in time was 205 students, and it goes up and down just depending. It shows the school sites where we currently have transitional kindergarten programs and the number of students that were enrolled on the CBEDS date. In addition, we do have 8 students that are transitional kindergarten that are attending our home study program. And we do have a TK SDC classroom. I believe it's a TKK or a TK1 SDC classroom with 1 transitional kindergarten student in that program. If we look at the next slide, and again, we're using projections to determine these numbers. So you'll see this year, 205 students, which aren't projections, they're real numbers, with not potential classroom needs, what we're currently living, 10 classrooms. If our projections for enrollment in the 2022 school year were to come in at 294, we're anticipating 12 TK classrooms. So we're in the process of talking about where those TK classrooms could go. Sometimes we put 2 on a school campus if there is space. In addition to that, we do look really carefully at the transitional kindergarten enrollment to determine if there is a large enough cluster of students that would indicate a need to see about either moving a program to a new site or adding a program at the site. One of the most recent ones where we did that was we had transitional kindergarten at Regnart originally. It was one of our original school sites. One year when we had transitional kindergarten, maybe it was this year or last year, we had a very small number of Regnart families that had enrolled for transitional kindergarten, but a very large number of Lincoln families that had enrolled. So we shifted the program. Typically the Regnart site housed Lincoln and Regnart students. And so we flipped it over to, it was at Lincoln and it housed Lincoln and Regnart students. Of course, as the month spans increase every 2 months, our number of projected students also are seen to increase, with potentially in 2025, when it's a full year's worth of 4-year-olds, we could potentially have 29 classrooms, which is 705 students. So we will see, we will monitor this carefully. The great thing is, as we look at 12 classrooms for next year, we are comfortable and confident that once we look at numbers, we'll be able to identify the final locations. And then the next slide, just real briefly, our current model plus our model for the 22-23 school year is mirroring our kindergarten schedule. The one thing that is different is that the regulation calls out for a 12-to-1 ratio. And we staff our classrooms currently at 24-to-1. So we are going to assign an instructional assistant to each TK classroom, which is allowable by the law. And we won't have more than 24 students maximum per classroom, which is what we do contractually anyways. As we look into the future, there are some models that we could consider that would, involve certainly conversation and stakeholder input. We could look at an AM PM program plus childcare. We could look at a late start transitional kindergarten program. We could look at a TKK multi-age program. And there is the potential that the ratio in regards to adult to student in future years could shift to 10 students to 1 adult. So we will come back at some point in time and have additional conversations. But with that, I'm going to shift over to Mike.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. The portion of my slide presentation tonight is just expanding a little bit kind of on where Leslie started, that the law requires a maximum of 12 students per adult. And like she has said before, in a perfect world, that's what we would do. But right at this point, we believe that we're going to have to look at 24. So we'll be looking at adding another adult in the room. So on the next slide, this is a graphic that talks about who can be that other adult. So the other adult can be met through instructional assistants that we have on deck already, instructional aides or other paraprofessionals. There's other classified positions that suit the bill. Preschool assistants can also serve. And there's also the option of creating a specialized job, which is a TK classroom aide, which is unique just to that position. Next slide, please. Currently, we look pretty good. My predecessors, I'm going to have to say Leslie and Stacy and those folks ahead of me had a lot of insight, and we have a lot of teachers already in our district that are certified to teach TK already. They were grandfathered in. Some were grandfathered in if they had experience prior to teaching TK prior to July 1, 2015. They've met the units, taking early childhood units. Or there's some now that might have the degree or the major that has a child adolescent development, or they're experienced in teaching preschool kids that equals 24 semester units right now, or they have a CTC preschool permit on file. Currently, we have all our teachers, all of our classes filled right now, and we have additionally 5 teachers who have previously taught TK and met the requirements who are currently not teaching TK at this time. So as we go out and recruit in the future, we have a really good base of folks that are excited about doing it, and other people who are now, this is a niche position, and there's a lot of people out there that are excited about teaching it, and they're becoming certified in that area as we, as they go through school. So that's it for me.
All right, thank you. Next couple slides, I'm going to talk a little bit about funding and facilities. I think we've all been experiencing this dilemma every time the state implements a new program. The questions of whether or not there's adequate funding to support this type of program is something that we should be aware of. And then similarly to when we implemented class size reduction back in the 1995 era, we were also having to deal with the facility requirements to be able to do that. So as we talk a little bit about transition kindergarten facilities in a few minutes, we'll talk about some of those challenges. But from a funding perspective, similarly to how we are currently funded for our current TK population, for funding purposes, we do collect ADA or average daily attendance on those kids once they turn age 5. So if I'm a 5-year-old, I'm enrolled, the district is able to collect attendance an apportionment for that student for the entire year, so long as they're age 5. But in some cases where districts enroll early younger kids, say they, in this case with universal TK, where we would be enrolling kids as early as 4, depending upon when their birth date is, the requirement again for funding is that not until they turn 5 is when districts receive funding. So that's the one thing I think people do need to understand, is that the funding, how the funding works for TKers. Next slide, please. And then this slide here is just a kind of an illustration in terms of how the attendance works, because depending upon when the student's birthday is and when the enrollment period closes, I mean the attendance period closes, that's referred to as P2. You've heard us talk about P2, and that's generally around April 15th. So for purposes of attendance taking, we're claiming all the ADA from the day that the student turns 5 until April 15th. And that's not necessarily a full 180-day school year. It's actually, in this case, about 135 days. So we're not receiving a full school year's worth of funding like any other student, but a prorated amount. Next slide, please. And then school services was trying to illustrate here how to show a break-even point here. But I would probably point out that this is maybe not the best example, because their example in terms of generating revenue for the 12 students based on LCFF funding assumes that those same 12 students also are either students who are on free and reduced or they're foster youth. And so that additional funding that comes directly to us as supplemental funding, school services is showing that money or that revenue going toward the break even. So I would probably not think that it would be a good example of in terms of break even. But I mean, I think you get the sense in terms of the program just doesn't quite cover all of the costs related to implementing it. But that is something that we are accustomed to, and class size reduction, is a very good example of where the state doesn't provide sufficient funding to actually fully cover the whole cost of implementing class size reduction. Next slide. So moving on to the facility piece, I think the most important thing here is that a TK classroom or TK facility is technically no different than a kindergarten classroom. So one of the things that we will be looking at right now is looking at all of our existing facilities to ensure that we have the facilities to meet the TK requirements. And mainly it's making sure that there's access to an age-appropriate bathroom, whether it's in the classroom or within the confines of that kindergarten or that transitional kindergarten complex. Next slide, please. Some of the things that we will be exploring, there are some grant opportunities out there for facilities, whether to add facilities or to modernize existing facilities. So I think we do need to take advantage of this because we do probably will need to I guess add to some of our existing facilities. I would think in the areas of restrooms to ensure that we meet all the requirements. Next slide, please. And then here's just and just like as I mentioned earlier too, with the with class size reduction, there was an implementation grant as well. So there's a planning and implementation grant that we can apply for too here to get us rolling with TK. Next slide. Actually, I think that's the last slide. I'll entertain any questions on facilities or funding.
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. So I have two questions, one for Leslie and one for you, Chris. Leslie, first of all, I love these presentations where everybody speaks. This is really cool. So thank you for arranging this. My question for Leslie is the projection for TK at sort of 2025 at steady state or at the full implementation is I think around 750. Remember when during the school consolidation discussions, when we're looking at the projections, we had K going out to 2029 in that 960, 950-ish range. I'm just wondering about the discrepancy here. It's dropped that much? Is it people who go to K don't go to TK? Because I know you got the numbers from Decision Insight. I was just wondering if we had any sort of explanation on our projections for K going out that far is about 950, but the projection for TK is 750. So that's a 200 difference. Wondering if we could get a follow-up on that at some point, if you don't have that off the top of your head.
I think I'd need to look into that unless Stacy or Allison have a thought about that, but I probably want to see if Decision Insight had a reasoning behind it, but I'm not sure.
And some of the numbers that we are looking at with Decision Insight, they are with our new numbers that we've been able to provide with our declining enrollment. So we will bring some projected numbers back that you'll see some of that slight change in our kinder numbers as well. I don't know off the top of my head where
Sure.
they are, so we'd be happy to bring that back
Yeah.
where there's been some slight changes.
That would be good. It'd be good to see the new projections. And then for the very next year, then we're looking at 2 new classrooms. It looks like from 10 to 12, I think, in your slides. Do we have a sense of where we want to put those 2 yet, or is that too early to say?
I think it really is at this point in time. One, we were waiting for the numbers in regards to the school consolidation and closure to determine whether or not TK would be feasible on sites that were receiving additional students. We know that with Muir closing, we have a TK classroom that was there that we'll need to find a location for. Typically, that classroom at Muir pulled from Collins and Eaton, so we'll look at that band of students. We'll have to look at facilities, because what we'd like to do is we'd like to make a decision that becomes a long-term decision. And then the final factor is determining, one, what our registration numbers will look like when priority registration begins. And again, where they're clustered from. I'd want to look at, when we identify sites, we will put tentative sites, because if we see an influx in one area over another area, we want the flexibility to move like we have done in the past. So there's so many different things to look at. Chris is looking at facilities carefully for that and for other programs.
Sure. So probably when would you say next semester would be able to make a decision on this?
Priority
tying you on to- I'm just-
priority registration begins in January and it
Okay.
goes through February. On our website, we have listed the current sites that we have, with the exception of Muir, of course. For Lincoln, I think we've put tentative. So we anticipate having them at the same sites that we currently have. Lincoln will be a question mark, but based on the numbers, we have to look to see if we're able to maintain one there. And then we'll begin planning. I think we have a meeting set up in January to discuss facilities and the impact.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, and Chris, if we go to slide 4, are we on slide 14, please? It's the one on funding limitations. So this is the one where you talk about, we're not really getting the full sort of the funding for the implementation. Does this matter if we're in basic aid? Because then it no longer, I know it changes the threshold, but in terms of funding, I can see how it matters under the old model, but in basic aid.
Going to basic aid, it changes it quite a bit.
Okay.
As far as what our funding is going to be based on. It won't be driven based on the numbers of students, but obviously property tax. But we'll see. We'll see.
And then right now, based on the analysis we have, would any of this introduction of universal TK change when we enter into basic aid, or you're still looking at sort of next year assess being in basic aid?
We're still anticipating going to basic aid next year, unless for some reason we hear in January that the state COLA is somehow astronomical number that it's based on the number of students that we have, it far exceeds the property tax level that we have. So that's really the only thing, but I'm not anticipating that.
Perfect, thank you. I'll hold the rest later. Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. Phyllis.
Yeah, so I'm still a little confused about the budget, Chris. It's not going to, so it's going to be in implementing TK is going to be an encroachment on the general fund. Is that correct? We're not going to get enough money from the state to implement the program. Am I right?
So yeah, let me clarify that. So obviously set basic aid to the side for a moment.
All right,
Under our current revenue, our revenue model right now, when you look at funding per pupil, because we are receiving a proportionate share of the funding for every transitional kindergartner, because there may not be age 5 by the time of the
Right,
first day of
right.
school, we're not receiving the full ADA, what we would receive for an entire school year for that student. We're only getting a portion of the year, right? A school year is 180 days. We're not getting the full funding for that entire year. We're actually getting a proportionate share of that because they're turning 5 potentially sometime after school starts.
So it doesn't pay for itself. It is an encroachment on the general fund. Is that correct?
I would categorize it because of the staffing requirements, because having to staff the classes at 12-1. And again, if I guess I'll just say it this way, I guess, if we have one teacher and they have a staffing ratio of 12-1, the ADA generated off of those 12 students isn't enough to cover the cost of that one teacher.
All right. And then in terms of facilities, I would like you to consider having placing these classes at a school that has enough space to be able to have 2 TKs at least on the same campus, because I think one class for everybody involved is not as efficient as being able to have 2 classes on a campus. So that's just would be a priority of mine. I don't know how others feel about it. And I have a couple of other questions, but I'll wait.
Thanks, Phyllis. I could come. It's Sylvia. I think. Same order.
Sorry, I'm mulling over Phyllis's question and your answer. So just so I understand, basically the state is saying that the school districts have to offer TK to 4-year-olds, but they're not going to pay for them until they're 5 years old. Is that what I'm understanding? Is that now and forever, or is that just in this transitional time?
That's currently too. I mean, right now with our current TK program, we could elect to enroll a 4-year-old, but because they're not 5 yet, we don't collect any revenue until they turn age 5.
But by the time we roll this out completely in 24, 25, and we have an entire year of 4-year-olds, at that point, we're still not getting any revenue or any funding from the state to support those 4-year-olds.
Well, I think with the new universal TK that they will bring that funding level down to age 4 once it's fully implemented.
I see. So in the rolling out years, in these next 3 years or 4 years, for us to get a full year of 4-year-olds versus just 3 months at a time, there's not a funding function to support the rollout of the program. But once it's completely rolled out, at that point, then they will change the ADA to start at 4 years old instead of starting at 5
Or
years
they
old.
they will, or they may.
Well, I mean, I'm saying that they will, because we're implementing a completely new grade. And so just like kindergarten, I mean, they have to fund that entire grade and that age group.
I'm from
I'm gonna say by
Missouri.
full implementation.
There is much talk in the legislation about changing the modeling to move from a K-12 model to a TK-12, but currently we are and will continue to only be funded for the days that student is 5 years and above.
And then my second question is in regards to staffing. So I guess this is for Mike. In terms of the TK teachers, are they certificated teachers in the same way that our current teachers are? Because I'm just trying to imagine, I know preschool teachers have a different kind of maybe degree or background or education. And if we're hiring preschool teachers, or maybe preschool is not the same anymore because those are 3-year-olds versus 4-year-olds. I'm just trying to understand, is there different levels of classification, or is it just exactly the same? And then the same with the IAs. Are we looking at a whole day IA versus like a half day IA, which is our general model?
Well, the TK teachers are certificated just like any other teacher. You can do it, several different ways. You can get the TK teaching credential, or you can get the multiple subject credential and do the add-on, which, a lot of folks do. And then there's the ones that have been grandfathered in who taught TK prior to 2015, and they're clear as well. So yes, there are. And with this happening, more universities are now starting a TK program so their teachers can get certified with that, but they would still be multiple subject teachers as well. And in terms of IAs, that's going to be based on need, like we do now. I mean, there's no special certification unless we wanted to get specialized and just hire, TK specialized aides, but that'd have to be something we came up with. Our own IAs now that we have can do this as well.
Okay.
They would be our general IAs that we
general
have
IAs.
currently.
But then, did I hear you correctly that, so the TK teachers that we have an additional certification? For
They have
TK?
whatever it may be, it might be additional hours, like
I see.
24 hours of early childhood education.
I see.
Some, depending on where you got your teaching credential, some universities or some states have different requirements for getting your teaching credential. And that might have been woven in. And as long as they have it on their transcripts and they can produce it, then they can get the extra certification from the state.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for all of this information. Always start there. So if we go back to actually, I think I'm sort of dovetailing with what Sylvia was just asking about, where you've got the consider creating a specialized job description. Is that what you're talking about? That if you were going to add an IA position that had something more than our general IAs, that would be a new job description, but with our existing?
Yeah, it's just one of the ways that we can meet the requirements to have 24 students in there. I mean, if we have IAs now, general ed IAs, we wouldn't have to do that, but some districts might choose to have a specialized IA. I mean, all our IAs now are gen ed IAs can all do that. So if we did it and we had to hire IAs, I'm sure we would just hire general ed IAs.
And from what we're hearing right now, there are no, subbing will continue to be the way substitutes are right now, where our subs won't have to meet that additional certification for our certificated staff in the room.
No,
No.
they'll
Okay.
just have to meet the minimum requirements to be a
general sub.
to get a sub permit.
Okay, so I think that's my HR ones. And then I think for Chris, thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.
So to sort of follow on, I think with where Phyllis and Jerry were going, do we know what other surrounding basic aid districts do as far as that balance between wanting to serve these kiddos, but also that it has a financial impact on our budget? Do they tend to stick to whatever the state guidelines are right now? Like if it's December 2nd birthdays, do they open it up to the full year, or do they stick to the December 2nd birthdays?
I don't know what another basic aid district would do in this particular case. Because again, it's for purposes of enrollment, it's up to the district to decide whether or not they would entertain enrolling a 4-year-old prior to enrolling into TK.
So even though it's a hit on their budgets from this, just a purely
From a
financial
from a
standpoint,
financial standpoint.
right now, we don't know, like, do you have a thought as to whether or not we're gonna stick with, are we gonna follow this, the rolling dates, or are we gonna look at some point at just including all dates?
Yeah, I think our intent right now as we move it forward, knowing that we'll follow the phasing in so that we'll be fully at the 2025 school year we have all 4-year-olds enrolled in the program.
Okay, that helps. Okay, and then I have to assume that at some point, and I guess this is probably also a follow-on to my colleagues' questions, they're gonna create a new grade span adjustment to account for the increased cost that comes with the aid in the classroom, right? Because this is more than just a kindergarten cost. This is kindergarten cost plus the extra staffing ratio piece. So, but they're not saying right now they're doing that starting next year with this universal TK rollout?
I haven't seen anything yet, no.
All right. Then the one other one that confused me just a little bit, on the slide that's the sample break even, you're using the 12 students with the adjusted basic aid. And that's based on that current number, because right now we're not getting any additional funding if we put an IA in there, right? So what do we know what the break even is going to be for the staffing ratio you're talking about for next year? Because this would be the this would be the sample break even for our current staffing ratio, but for next year, there's going to be the additional cost, right?
Yeah, this is just a sample. This isn't even our numbers, so.
Oh, yes, this is school services. Okay. So it would be helpful maybe to have this slide at some point, maybe in the spring. Showing the break even
our
for what
break-even number.
our adopted ratios are going to be for next year. Because I think we said for sure, right? For 22, 23, we're doing the aid. Okay, so that might be helpful to have at some point. Then can you go back to, sorry, I guess it's the very last slide from school services. For the funds where they're talking about recruitment, hiring, training, professional development, materials, supplies, this is going to have a really large rollout cost for us from the standpoint of recruiting staff that have those extra units, the IAs that we need to bring up to speed for those classrooms. Is that all supposed to come out of, I have to assume this is a grant they're giving us?
An implementation.
An implementation grant, and that's all got to come out of $25,000 to $100,000? All right. Okay, thank you. That's my questions.
Question or a comment?
Yeah, question or a comment. There you go.
Thanks, Laurie. I think pretty much, I think everybody asked, I think I have also the same confusion about this 5-year-old, the funding for 5 year, right? Because year after year, or when you are closer to 2024, we will have 75% or so of the class size without funding. So if you see the number here, we are anticipating, let's say 22 classrooms or 29 classrooms. That means at least one teacher and one IA. That means about 40 to 60 additional headcounts will be needed. And 75% for that is not practically funded. So that goes back to what Phyllis asked, like, it will be eating up the general fund then. So how are we projecting that? Because about a 40 additional headcount without having a funding, how is it going to be?
So, as Chris alluded to, we would expect there to be some adjustment to the funding to come down to represent a TK through 12 funding model. We don't have that information now. There's a lot of the conversation about it. But if nothing were to change, then in fact, we would continue to increase the number of TKers coming in with those that are only turning, once they turn the age of 5, that we would receive funding. We would be in the same situation as every other school district and facing that. And so I think those are part of those conversations that have to happen.
So are you anticipating a big risk here in terms of money?
We haven't
Because
heard,
this
we
is we are
haven't
talking
heard
about-
anything at this point. There may be something coming out in the January governor's budget, but we haven't heard anything at this point.
Yeah, I think somewhere, I think this area probably definitely would appreciate if we can get a little bit more, light on that area. So because this is the major concern. Otherwise, it's all great. We are projecting, we are marching towards that. But at the same time, when the numbers go up and we don't have funding, then definitely I think we are making a bigger hole here. Thank you. That's all from my end. Any second round questions?
I think for me, Lori covered pretty much what I wanted to ask. I guess that's just as a concluding question or comment is, Chris's presentation had a lot of good information about what the rules are. And I think to Lori's point earlier, seeing how this maps to CUSD, what our needs are, what the numbers look like, be great to see. When can we, when are you guys scheduled to bring this back to the board to update us on once we know what the actual numbers are?
I think with the open enrollment period, we would have numbers by March that we could come back and bring some updated information and planning.
That'd be terrific. Thank you. All right. That's it for me. Thank you, Satish.
I'd just like to plus one all the comments about money. I would also like to see more information about exactly what it's going to cost us in terms of out-of-pocket expenses in addition to the grant that we're getting. So March would be great. And then Allison, I had a question about curriculum. Are we going to have some sort of consistent curriculum across the district for our TKs, or do we even know yet what that's going to look like? Or
Yes, one of our directors, Michelle Herod, she works regularly with the TK teachers, and when TK was first implemented, curriculum resources were provided. We have been working on updating those. So for example, we purchased the new updated English language arts curriculum this year for TK. She worked with the TK teachers this summer to do some curriculum mapping work, and actually phonics is on their list for study this year. So yeah, we are, I know Michelle really enjoys working with the team. We have an excellent team of teachers that are really passionate about early childhood learning, and they just bring so much to the discussion. So we're working away on our process. In science, when we moved to the new program for kinder, we repurposed the FOSS kindergarten kits for TK. So that also happened this year, and we'll continue to make sure we update each year as needs grow. And we also had some funding in our budget this year to increase the hands-on materials and books in the classroom. So that'll be also on deck for this spring with Michelle and the group.
great, thank you. Thank you, Satish.
Thanks, fellas. Lori, you have more questions?
Not more questions
Or
or
comments?
comments. Okay.
Yeah, fine.
So the I guess second to last slide calls out the new construction or retrofit projects. Chris, do we know if any of our bond projects since that, what date do they have? July 1st, 2018? Are any of our bond projects that we've done between 2018 and 2021 going to be, were any of them TK upgrades that will be eligible to apply for any of those funds?
I don't know after I left. I'd have to check.
Okay, that would be, I'd be interested to know that. And then also, I think it goes without saying, we hardly ever qualify for what should be our fair share of grants just because of the way we score, but that money's going to go super fast. So if we can be first in line or as ready to go as we can for submitting for what money we might be available for, that would be really important, I think, although the odds of us getting much of it is probably pretty slim. So anyway, thank you.
Lori, I have a general question in this admission process currently, because we are having only 10 schools, right? So is it like it's a parent choice, they get it, or it's kind of an open enrollment when they get in? How does they get? How a kid will get into a specific school, or we allowed?
Right, so they register for transitional kindergarten and we place them based on regions. So we determine, so for example, like I said, the Muir TK, the schools that fed into that were actually Collins, Eaton, and Muir. And so we determine which schools would naturally feed into it. And again, tentative placements in case our numbers come in differently. And then if a family, let's say, says, well, I don't really want to go to Muir, I'd rather go to Montclair, they would be able to open enroll to go to a different transitional kindergarten program, a different site.
So when they get into kindergarten, they will go to their neighborhood school, or they can continue the school where they are in right now.
They are automatically rostered for their neighborhood school. They can open enroll to remain at their transitional kindergarten site, and they are provided a priority over open enrollments kids. They're not provided a priority over a neighborhood's family. But they are, if I was at Lincoln's transitional kindergarten program and I wanted to stay there rather than going to whatever school, Eisenhower, I don't know, whichever school, I would be able to do that through open enrollment. And then I get tagged as a transitional kindergarten student at Lincoln. And as we let kids in, they are priority. And we really do try to honor that. And part of that goes back years ago when we accept students or place students in programs for continuity for families. We do everything we can to allow them to have their whole experience at that one school site if possible.
I just have one more comment.
Yes, yes, please.
And I'm not sure there's a solution for this, but I think we should think about it. Some children who probably need TK the most have family situations where they can't get to a faraway school to attend TK. And I think that's sad. And I don't know what we can do about it, if we can do anything about it, but I think we should think about that. Because I think those high need kids ought to have the opportunity to go to TK.
So we do pay attention to our numbers, our low SCS numbers and the locations where they're coming from. We have, when we started the TK program, we ensured that we had them at 2 of our school sites. They're 2 of our Title I school sites. We have no desire to move them off of those campuses for exactly that reason. We added at Eisenhower. So we really do look at sort of those factors also. And I would agree, if we did not have it at a site in those locations, we would potentially lose students. We had experiences where we needed to put 2, at one time we had, I think, 3 transitional kindergarten classes on the Nimitz campus. There were so many Stockelmeyer, before we put one at Stockelmeyer, there were so many Stockelmeyer students that filled the Nimitz classrooms, and therefore there was not room for Nimitz students. And we said, well, that's not okay. So we'll add and subtract based on that need.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'll plus one what Phyllis said. And I also want to go back and plus one something Phyllis said earlier, which this just reminded me of, which is I do think the continuity of having the ability to like grade level plan with a partner on one campus is super important. It's tough for me as a parent who isn't so far away from my young child experience that it's hard to beat the convenience of having the ability to drop your TK or where your older sibling is, but that said, I think I also as a parent would value balancing the teaching and learning experience and the curriculum development experience and all of those things that come when our teachers are able to be with their grade level team. So I would just plus one what Phyllis said earlier about where we can having 2 TK classrooms on one campus. I think the other thing that I didn't hear raised that I think is sort of a follow on to that is, while I totally understand identifying where the students are coming from, I think over time, as we're going to roll out this universal kindergarten program and it's going to expand, at some point, I do think we need to kind of put a stake in the ground on where those classrooms are going to be long-term. And if it means that we've got a year where more students are coming from the neighboring school that isn't where we've got TK located, that unless that becomes a long-term trend over multiple years, maybe at some point we need to give some thought to really just stabilizing at one site and letting it be the site for that micro region of the district for TK is just sort of what's in my head. But if other people have other reasons why that's not a good idea, then that probably would make sense to hear about that too. So anyway, just my thoughts.
I had one more question. I guess it's following on Phyllis's comment about not everybody being able to get to TK. Just does with universal TK, does that mean that truancy also begins with TK? So it's still an option. It's still an optional program or an optional grade for families.
Truancy doesn't kick in at this point until the age of 6. So truancy, we do send home letters, but the truancy laws do not kick into effect for our kindergartners either that are under the age 6. So yes,
I
it's
see.
an optional, both are optional programs.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Anything?
I'm good, thank you.
So,
For public comments.
yeah, any public comments?
We do not have any public comments on this item.
And we'll move on.
I'm so sorry, Satish. Can I ask one more?
Okay.
Allison, what happens with does this change anything for requests for, or considerations for either holding a child back and or moving them forward in a grade? Will it change any of our policies around alternative placements in that regard?
I don't think so. We do have that provision where we can't keep retaining a child in kindergarten and holding them back multiple years, and that was put in some time ago. I don't see any other implications for that. We have in policy that we move kids from TK to K now. No, we don't accelerate kids or retain them in TK. We have the policy coming up next, and I think our only revisions were around the timeline, the suggestions there on TK. So at this point, I don't see any implications there. Leslie, do you?
No, I don't.
Okay, thank you.
The move? Yeah, so.
Sorry.
Yeah. No. So discussion items, 12.1.
So directly following up from the presentation on TK, it would require us to take a look at our current board policy. And so do have a draft for you to review tonight, incorporating those changes to implement the expanded TK.
And the major change for this was language cleanup, which we always have every time CSBA sort of just overhauls. But the main change is related to the eligibility and actually putting forth what, and I see an error. We have an extra 0 in the first one through the 2021-2022 school year. We'll fix that. But then the subsequent years and how the months roll out. So this is really just information item, depending on your thoughts, comments, or discussion. We would bring it back to the next meeting, hopefully on consent.
Since any discussion needed?
I'm good with this, no questions.
Okay.
Fine with it. Thank you.
Sylvia, anything? Lauren?
And a follow up on my previous question. So if a family, that we've got the red line in here that says students who complete TK shall be eligible to continue in kindergarten. If a family wishes to give their child some extra time, let's say because of where their birthday falls, would they now have the choice to do that in either TK or K, or would we still, in most cases, have them move on to K and then consider that for a second year in K?
So if they are TK age appropriate and the family determines they do not want to put them in TK the following year, they would be K appropriate. We place by age. So they would not be doing transitional kindergarten as a 5-year-old.
Okay, so
As
they
a new-
they couldn't do a second year of TK if that was the family.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
so we wouldn't allow, or the policy and or the state wouldn't allow a second
Correct.
year.
And
of
actually,
TK.
I thought I was looking for that. I thought there was language that says students let me get back to you on that when we bring it back. There was language that said that students cannot be in that program. They can only do 2 years of transitional kindergarten. So if I do transitional kindergarten and then
Okay.
kindergarten, I can't do kindergarten again. I can't do 3 years. And I can't, but I could do kindergarten twice, but I couldn't do transitional kindergarten twice because the TKK is considered a 2-year program. And there's language about it. I thought it was in here. I will look for it. I'll call that out at the next meeting.
So if you have a kiddo who's, let's say, an August birthday, and they do TK the year that are brand new 4-year-old, and they get to they get through that year, and they move on to kindergarten as a brand new 5-year-old, and they still need, family determines they were a kiddo that they wish they'd had a little bit more time, they still go on to first grade with this policy and this rollout?
Correct, and that's actually education code. I
That's
found
code.
it.
Okay,
It's towards the bottom before you get to assessment. So education code reads that a student shall not attend more than 2 years in a combination of TK and kindergarten. So we don't have control over that.
go back and read the
Okay.
non-red line parts. I hadn't read that.
And I couldn't find it because it wasn't read.
Thank you.
So I'm confused. Back in the day, we used to be able to hold kids out of kindergarten for a year. I did with my son. You can't do that anymore?
We can, if they've not had TK or K and they come in, there are times where we would put a child in a kindergarten classroom, but they cannot be in there for more than 2 years. Really, the way code reads is that the advice is you put them grade level appropriate. Age level appropriate. But yes, the gift of time, it's a little tricky.
Thank you.
I don't have anything. Anyone else? So do we need any update on this, Lori, or can it come as a concern next time? Or do we need anything from Leslie?
No, I'm going to go back and do my own reading again. I had read about this a couple years ago, and I need to go back and reread before I have questions. So I'll follow up with Leslie. Thank you. Yeah, I'm good.
You're okay then to bring it
Bring it
as a
back
concern?
as consent.
Yeah. And the next one is 12.2, the board meeting dates. Stacy,
So hard to believe that we're talking about dates for our next year's board meetings, but I do have a draft schedule. Really what this calendar does, it continues to offer our board meetings twice a month, Tuesdays and second and fourth Thursday of each month. Other than we do have a few months that it doesn't fall in line. We do have one board meeting proposed for July. That really does allow us before we kick off that school year to bring back any potential items that we haven't had the opportunity over the month of July. And then it does create 3 board meetings in June, which we have found very beneficial as we are bringing back our budget. Gives us an opportunity to review the budget, gives us an opportunity to review the LCAP prior to that final approval by the board. The other shift with this year is we took a look at when our board advances fell and tried to strategically align them with as the year is progressing and what we are as we roll out our district priorities. So instead of starting a board advance prior to the school year or right early on in the school year, is really using a fall board advance to have the progress update after a couple of weeks into the school, and then align so that it truly does align every couple of months we're bringing back, and culminates with a board advance in June that would really allow us to share the progress from the entire year, but also then talk about the planning for the fall, versus right now it feels like we come back into our fall, have a board advance, and we're already starting into the school year. And we'd rather change that dynamic and talk about things happening beforehand and versus after they've already happened. And so open to any considerations that you may have for alterations. I know we do have the flexibility throughout the year that we do change dates if needed, but do like to get these onto the calendar so people can plan, and our schools also build their calendars around these dates as well.
Sure. Yeah, I like the new dates for the events. I think that makes a lot of sense to me, so I support that. In terms of the location, I mean, any chance of going back to 1309 South Mary, or
So there's a very strong chance of going back to 13.9. We are actually proposing to relocate effective in January back into our board meeting room at our district office. Best intents as we moved out here into Collins and having more space, but we are impacting the site here as we're setting up for the board meetings, and that's the last thing that we wanted to do was take away the learning space for our students. And so we will make that accommodation and be moving back into the board office in January.
all right, thank you. Thanks, Satish.
Anything?
Nothing for me.
Okay,
Thank you.
Sylvia.
I just had one question or concern. It's been a while, but do we usually have an advance in December after election cycle to do protocols and things like that?
Our typical one has always been a board advance in October-ish or January. And so this one would still allow that winter advance in January. We'd come back and look at board protocols after elections of new officers and members.
And then I don't know if this falls under board meeting dates, but I wanted to float the idea of changing the name from advanced to study session, which just, I think, explains it a little bit better. So I don't know if that's something to discuss here or not, but
What's the origin of the name Advance? I'm okay with it. I'm just curious. Why was it called Advance to begin with?
That I wouldn't have a.
Have the answer, of course. Back in the day, way back in the day, we had a superintendent who said, Cupertino Union School District does not retreat. We advance. And it stuck for all these years.
Are you serious, Phyllis?
I am
That's why it's
serious.
Advance?
Absolutely serious.
Because we don't retreat? Oh,
Leslie's
wow.
mom. Wasn't her that did it. It was the superintendent first.
You're kidding me. Oh, wow. Okay.
Was that a vet?
Pardon?
That was a vet?
The vet, yeah. no problem, yeah.
All right.
Okay, wow.
That's a good story, Phyllis.
It is.
I'm not opposed to it at all, Sylvia, and I have certainly encountered community confusion over the term advance. So whether or not we keep the tradition and say advanced study session or study session advance or just study session, I'm fine with any of it, but I do agree that something that helps clarify it a little bit, and maybe it should be study session advance, because then the study session comes first, might be helpful.
Certainly don't want to break tradition, so we
I have
will
no
incorporate
I'd break
them
it.
together.
I don't have a preference. I'm okay in either case.
I'm fine with just study session too. Like, I'm not stuck on advance. I'm just saying if we want to maintain the tradition.
Or add on to it. Advanced study session. 20 years from now, someone will be asking.
so this isn't a vote, is it? This is because this
is just
a,
feedback.
all right, yeah.
So curious anyway, so I can ask, right? So any, at least neighboring districts or where you are interacting, any of them have similar things and a different name? Do you know?
I believe that the high school district calls it study session.
I think a majority refer to it as a study session because it really is that opportunity to go a little bit more in depth into some of those topics. So they refer to it, whether they call it, they oftentimes will refer to it as a study
There are
session.
definitely some K districts in the county that still call theirs retreats too. That
Retreats,
retreats
okay,
is
yeah.
the other one. that
I
you-
heard someone saying. that,
They used to
yeah.
be retreats in Cupertino prior to event. They were retreats and then they became advances. Yeah.
Some decision need to be made or?
No,
It's a discussion, first of all, it's a discussion item, but.
I'll take the input and come back with a new title. And if okay with you guys, we'll bring it back as a consent item at the next board meeting.
Okay, thank you. And I have one, I think you missed the chance. Did you talk? No. Do you have anything, any input?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No, I'm good with that.
Then only one thing which I have is this 6 PM, and board advance, since you're specify, it's all meetings, right? So I think, can you change that accordingly? Why did we put 6 PM specifically here? And because board advance time is different, right? So,
We can actually add that onto the calendar of events to let the
yeah,
board
but I
advance
think
times be.
probably 6 PM you can take it out. Then,
Oh.
yeah, then I think it'll be. Because this is a mix of multiple meetings, right? We have study sessions and the regular board meeting.
And we can add an additional column and we'll just call out the 6 PM to the general board meetings and then we
something
can
like
put the
that,
time
just
for
to
that, just to
clarify that.
clarify for
Yeah,
public. Sure.
So it's not that, because this in last year also we got people asking questions, why this advance is happening in the daytime.
Great point.
So why can't you move it around? So kind of, so let's make it clear then.
We can clarify.
Thank you. Any other comments? Does it need a public comment or anything? No.
I
Discussion
don't,
items?
There are no public comments on this item.
We should,
Have we checked? So the June 15th one is, if that's a Thursday, that's probably high school graduations, but
I don't believe that is. I believe the high school graduation is earlier than the.
It's
but
June 15th.
Tuesday that week.
Usually the first week of June.
yeah, but June 8th could be.
June, oh,
yeah,
sorry,
so
the 8th.
June 8th, not 15th. June 8th could be a graduation day, maybe. I think.
Sorry,
Go
that's
back and
probably
double
one I
check.
had.
We do have Fremont's calendar.
Yeah, I think it
that
is
we'll
June
double
8th,
check on that.
maybe possible, yes.
I believe theirs was in between the 8th and the 15th for next year, but I'll double check on that.
Okay. I mean, it may be that it, I'm sure we've had them in the past on the nights of graduations, but that's the only thing that really flags for me.
So what we'll go, and as you said, like this could be, if any changes needed later, because it'll be hard for us to visualize 10 months from now, what's it, right? So and it'll come as a consent item.
It can come as consent and I'll make sure I highlight if there are any changes that we do need to make to accommodate the graduation.
Great, thank you. And then always so helpful when it's pre-populated into the calendars. So thank you, Nancy, once we vote on it on consent. I'll just say thank you ahead of time.
Okay, Chief, no other discussion needed. Let's go to the action items 13.1. Approval of the first interim. So can we have a motion?
I move to approve the first interim financial report for 21-22.
After second, we can discuss.
I
You can-
second.
Okay, second. Do we need any discussion on this or directly you want to go to action? It's not a discussion action item, so we can go
You
directly.
can vote straight away.
Okay, so all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Oh, okay, so the motion carried. 13.2, the educator effectiveness.
I'll move the adoption of the plan for use of educator effectiveness block grant funds.
Second.
Thanks, Sylvia. Sylvia second. And all in favor say
Aye.
aye. Any opposed? No. So motion carried. Then the 13.3 is the instruction material for science.
I move we approve the SIPSA plans for 21, 22.
Back one, Phyllis, adoption of instructional materials.
Sorry. I move that we adopt the instructional materials in science for grade 6 through 8.
And some,
Second,
okay, thanks, Sylvia. Sylvia. And all in favor?
to check on this point of order, do we need to check for public comments or?
Question needs a
There are
public comment?
There are no public comments.
No, do we, okay, do we need
There
for
can be
every
public
action?
comments on these items, yes.
Okay, so, okay, sorry, then I think we were fast then. So-
It's okay. We knew there weren't any public comments, so we haven't
Okay.
omitted anyone
Yeah.
at this point.
Okay, then all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? No, so motion carried. And 13.4, approval for SIPSA.
I already sort of did. I'll move.
Yeah, fellas, first and second.
I can second.
Okay, thanks. Lord, all in favor? Okay, public comments, anything?
There are no public comments.
Okay, then I think the order should be that. Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No, also motion carried. 13.5, resolution of disbursement of surplus property.
I move to adopt the resolution 21-22-12.
Terry, second.
I can second.
Okay, Sylvia came first, so you're second, Sylvia. So any,
There are no public comments.
so all in favor say
Aye.
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 Any opposing? No. So motion carries. 13.6, approval of joint health and welfare memorandum.
I'll move approval of the joint health and welfare MOU.
Second.
Thanks. Public comment.
No public comments.
Okay, then favor say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? The motion carries. So basically all 13 actions have completed. And next is we'll go to 14.1 board activities in the last one.
Can I just comment real quick on all of those items in 13? I know that represents an enormous amount of staff work, so I just want to acknowledge that and say thank you. that was quite the action item list tonight, guys.
Thank
All
you.
right.
And most of these things we had enough discussion also in detail. So that's also good, like last few meetings, right? So it came and it's bundled together. It's not that just we are moving things.
Right,
We
and
have-
I think
Yeah.
that is an important thing to highlight is we will always attempt to bring everything before as either an information or discussion prior to ever bringing it forward as an action item.
But actually, we had last week, at least most of the things extensive. Thank you very much for that. So any board activity, committee reports, anything? Any?
Sylvia and I met with a couple of parents from Regnar, and they had what Sylvia and I felt was some misinformation about both budget and enrollment. And so we encouraged them to get in touch with Chris and Leslie to make sure that those that they had accurate information on those topics. Their ask from us, from the two of us, was that we delay the closing of Regnar. We did not respond to that ask.
It was a casual meeting? Or
It
was
was a
ca-
Zoom meeting. There were two parents and the two of us. What would you add to that, Sylvia?
You covered it.
Okay.
I'll highlight that several of us got to go this morning to the PBL project-based learning celebration of learning at DeVargas on their riparian habitats project. And it was so great to see a whole grade level full of third graders and a couple of combo teams from the second grade class and learn all about their creek studies, largely based on the McClellan Ranch Preserve, which is a wonderful gem in our community. And then for our second graders, the life cycle of the bee, which was great. So.
Sylvia and I had our quarterly meeting with the union.
Lean into your mic. I can't hear you.
Oh, okay. We had our, there's a generally traditionally what, which you all know that like we meet union like every quarter. So we had it yesterday. So myself and Sylvia met, but we did not have representation from everywhere. We had only one union representative.
And I think for me, I had an opportunity to go attend a couple of holiday performances at the middle school and some elementary schools. And just really wonderful to see, first of all, just like, as you mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, how much the music and choir, the teachers are doing so much to really try to keep those traditions alive. And it was just, a wonderful celebration. And so, glad that our families and our staff get a chance to get this break coming up next week. So just wishing everybody a happy holiday.
I don't have anything.
Okay, so I think we'll go to the next item. That's agenda setting. Anyone? It's 15.1.
I have one that I will be bringing back on the January 13th for under a consent is to adjust our January board advance from January 27th to the February 2nd date due to some scheduling conflicts in my office. So I'll bring that back formally for you guys to approve as a consent.
I have a request just for the sort of year at a glance calendar aspect. I assume that we're gonna, at some point this year, have our plan for middle school graduation. So it would be good to know sort of what's happening with that. And if we're gonna need to, as board members, be adding any of that to our calendars, that would be helpful to know. And then the other one, sort of anticipatory for sometime probably in the spring, as I know 2022 will be an election year, and that we have in years past offered some sort of opportunity for those interested in running to come and learn about the requirements, as well as the time commitment, as well as the sort of skills and things you need to know if you're considering. So would be helpful if we could look at some dates around that.
Joys of being a board member.
Yes. All right, there you go.
We'll talk I think when we are thinking, because I'm thinking some more ideas on. Yeah, so. And then we are done. Professor Ajay. Okay, the meeting is adjourned at 7:48.